Hello, all. Welcome to this special afternoon edition of MFP Live. I'm Donna Ladd, the founding editor of the Mississippi Free Press, and I have some very special guests here with me today, particularly Jackson Mayor Chowke A. Lumumba, as well as MFP reporter Nick Judin. And this episode is dedicated to a conversation about Jackson water and infrastructure. I don't really have to tell most people watching this what had happened, but obviously since the winter weather left Jackson without water for a month this spring, the condition of the capital city's infrastructure has exploded onto the national radar with conversations about systemic breakdowns in equity and inequities affecting our nation's cities. That dialogue is happening in no small part due to the men with me here today on MFP Live, Mayor Lumumba and Nick, who just reported part 3 of his in-depth Jackson Water series. And this one spans the last 50 years of why we are where we are today, and of first federal help to Jackson, and then a certain degree of federal neglect. So we're going to talk about some of these issues here today. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Discussion.
So, Mayor, I'm just going to start out by saying, well, first of all, congratulations on your primary win. I know that's probably a relief to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Certainly happy to have the support of the residents. We have big work ahead of us. So, I want to remind everybody we still have a general election, but as we come to that, we have to remember that there are big tasks ahead of us, and one of which we're going to discuss today.
Right. And so let's get into that. I mean, first, I just want you to open it up and just give us the lay of the land where you see it standing right now with the Jackson water crisis.
Well, I think that the best way to characterize where we find ourselves while we have residents that have had their water restored, that they no longer are under a boil water notice, I would say that we are still in the midst of a crisis. Because it's not a matter of if we will suffer a catastrophic event again, but when we will suffer another catastrophic event if we don't have the resources in order to not only address our aged infrastructure, but to weatherize our infrastructure. The 30-year events, the infrequent weather events that we used to say happen over a span of time have now become routine. And so we have hotter summers, colder winters, and more rain than has previously been the case historically. And all of that takes a toll on our infrastructure. Not only do we have extreme challenges in terms of how we weatherize, extreme challenges in terms of how we update 2 water facilities, one which is more than 100 years old, but another one which is nearly 40 years old and out of date as well. And so we have to meet these challenges, not only in terms of how we protect against these type of events, but updating in a way which is consistent with the requirements of the federal government and the Safe Drinking Water Act.
So Mayor, we all know that the conversation and even maybe the political dynamic between the state and the city has I don't know if the word has changed, but has definitely come to the forefront since Lieutenant Governor Hosemann had criticized the city's leadership since he said the city's last white mayor. And then you said in the mayoral debate before the primary that Hosemann had also asked you to give up the airport for more state funding for infrastructure. Needless to say, these things kind of created a higher level or an intense dialogue about this relationship between the city and the state. So what I'm wondering, before I kick this back to Nick to get into some more specifics about the crisis itself, where does the city's relationship with the state stand right now?
Well, the city is always in a posture of working with whomever can benefit our residents. We work with a coalition of the willing. Even after our conversation and the discussions that were made public, we sat down with the lieutenant governor. We made our requests clear. we saw $3 million out of a $47 million request honored. And so we certainly are not satisfied with that. And we will continue to push the envelope to make sure that we get every resource that we need. What we have to understand is that these aren't partisan issues, right? We're not arguing for Democratic water or Republican water. We're arguing for a resource that human beings need. And so that's what we have to maintain focus on. But I do want to make it clear that it has always been our objective, long before we suffered the catastrophic events in February, that this has been an ongoing request within the city, not only in terms of what we have communicated to state officials, but also traveling to Washington, talking to our U.S. delegation, explaining our need for these resources. We have understood the condition in which our facilities are in at this present moment in time, and so we've known, we've communicated, we've been screaming out to the fact that if we don't do something, then we will have a very dire circumstance unfold. And so this is not only the condition in Jackson, Mississippi. Far too many legacy cities are finding themselves in a similar position. And so I think it is now appropriate. It is past the appropriate time that we have a real discussion on infrastructure. I'm happy to see that these conversations have been underway recently. And I'm willing to make Jackson, Mississippi, the poster child for America's infrastructure and the need to address it.
So I actually do want to follow up on that. There seems to be a disconnect between state leadership and between yourself and a lot of city leadership over what the city needs. I noticed that, in my first conversation with Lieutenant Governor Hosemann, he said that he hadn't seen a comprehensive plan. And then actually after the session, after the 3 million emerged, House Speaker Philip Gunn also said that he had not seen a comprehensive plan. And I highlighted in part 2 of my story that there is a master water plan from 2013, and it's an update to one at the turn of the century. In those conversations, has it been clear that there is a distinct plan with a 20-year capital improvement plan attached to it?
That has been very clear. The city of Jackson has not failed to incorporate a plan. That has not been our issue. Our issue is that we haven't had the resources to implement the various plans that we have. In fact, we could shepherdize the many plans that we have had. And so a plan is only as useful as the willingness to execute it. And so if we don't have the resources, if we don't have the partnership to execute those plans, then it just becomes documents that sit on our shelves. And so as we've sat down with not only Lieutenant Governor, but the Speaker, we've come to them and let them know that anything that they need in order to make this decision, that we're willing to support them in that. We're willing to provide the information that they need. And so that's what we do. Sometimes the politics may get in the way in some of those conversations, and we have to be able to move beyond that. We should be able to come into a room, identify where we have a common end and objective, debate where we may have differences, but leave the room with more unity than we arrived with. And so we're always willing to have those conversations, and we're always willing to provide the information necessary to facilitate an informed decision on how we resource the city of Jackson. We have to understand that we cannot continue to punt the football and look at this as Jackson's problem. Look at this as who is at fault. Now we can have those conversations at the necessary and appropriate time. But the reality is sometimes it's less important discovering who is at fault as it is who's responsible for making sure that we get beyond the challenge that is in front of us now.
Let me, before we move on, be clear. Do you feel like now at this moment, the state is listening better? Has all this attention and all the national interviews and all these things that have been happening that's kind of about systemic racism and some of the historic things, has it helped or hurt? I mean, I just want to know what you think about that.
Well, I will just say this. Whether or not I thought I was revealing some private conversation, which I did not, because it had been so loudly echoed through the halls of the state capitol. I thought that we were sharing common knowledge, right? It has changed from a posture that basically pointed towards we have made a decision, or that the lieutenant governor had made a decision that he was not going to honor Jackson's legislative agenda unless we were able to settle the lawsuit over the airport. And so the entire conversation, the entire communication talking about these infrastructure woes was placed on a back burner based on an issue that has no correlation or association to the needs of the residents in this way. And so by exposing that, I do believe that more conversation has taken place than was taking place before at that time. The question becomes whether or not there is just lip service, a willingness to just patronize the inquiries of the city of Jackson, or whether there is a sincere effort to recognize that Jackson's success is the state of Mississippi's success. Jackson is the economic engine for the state of Mississippi. When we have to shut down businesses, when the operations in the city of Jackson come to a halt, then most certainly the state of Mississippi will feel the result of that as well. And so I'm not interested in a fight. I'm not interested in like I said, a partisan discussion. I'm interested in how we help the state of Mississippi. For far too long, the state of Mississippi has been at the bottom of so many important statistical variables. One is the poverty rate, and so we have to understand that if we're sincere about moving the state of Mississippi forward, then we can't at the expense of the city of Jackson be willing to sink the entire ship. And the entire ship will sink unless we're able to better support the city of Jackson as it better supports the state of Mississippi.
So we've seen that legacy cities without sufficient revenue for a modern water and sewer system, these exist across the country. In your conversations with federal agencies, including the EPA, is there an awareness of this gap created by federal policy? And what steps are being taken to address it?
I think that there is an awareness. There has been, I think the discussion is evolving over time. The EPA being regulatory in its practice, in most instances, they are realizing that cities don't often, or a good portion of cities don't fail to meet the regulatory requirements because of a lack of political will, or a lack of recognizing their responsibility to their residents, but an insufficient revenue source that enables them to implement those regulations that are put in place. And often when we associate fees or fine cities, those are costs or expenses that are often passed on to poor people who couldn't afford to pay for the resources or to provide the resources to implement whatever was being requested in the first place. And so that doesn't serve to aid where we're going. And so I would just say that our recent discussions with the EPA have been very encouraging, have been very optimistic. In fact, had a discussion as recently as today, and both sides are really expressing a true willingness and an energy around how we get beyond these challenges and how we better communicate and how they better support the city. It is the EPA that was one of the first agencies in the federal family to reach out to the city of Jackson and say, listen, we want to be a help, right? Traditionally, those conversations are, and this is, the course of time in the city of Jackson. We want to find out why you're not doing this, and we want to impose penalties because you haven't reached this goal. And so it feels good to have an EPA team that calls and say, listen, we recognize what is happening. We want to be a help. We want to know if you know about this resource. We want to know if you are familiar with the Rural Water Authority, which is a part of the mutual aid agreement that the federal government provides, where we help bring technical assistance to your city to support you in this time. We want to know if you are aware of this grant. We want to know what your communication is with this congressperson or this federal official, and how we may be of an aid. We've been asking and requesting, and we feel that the relationship is sound enough that we can ask for support letters in some regard as we go after state support, so they understand how important the efforts that we are trying to have underway are to the city of Jackson. That it's not just a mere request. It's not a luxury that we're calling on. We're trying to comply with the Safe Drinking Water Act. We're trying to make sure that we have people have sustainable infrastructure to support their lives.
So in writing this story and in looking at the period after the federal pullback happens in the late 80s, we see two ways that cities are expected to pay for their water and sewer systems. Now, one of those is the state revolving loan funds that we can talk about in a minute. The other is rate increases. What can the city do in terms of rate increases to pay for this gap? Has the city raised rates enough?
Well, that has been a question that we have had posed to us, not only by the EPA over time, but even discussions with some of our bond insuring agencies for the bonds that we have issued from our enterprise fund. And often it is my perspective that when they look at the need for more money, when they look at the need to address all of these large challenges, it's almost like a carpenter with one tool, a hammer. And so everything looks like a nail, right? And so that is the tool of, maybe you need to raise the rates, maybe you need to raise the rates. And that may be a serious conversation that we need to consider. And so we are doing a rate study to see if our rates are consistent with our needs. But what we know about the city of Jackson is that we have the unique challenge of a water billing infrastructure contract that went awry. And so we don't consistently bill our residents as we need to. We don't consistently get the revenue that is expected based on those billing challenges. And so we have to make certain, before we get to whether we have a rate problem, we have to address our collections problem that we know that we have. We're not collecting the tariff that we have presently sufficiently enough to fully understand whether or not there is a rate challenge. I think that is a possibility, but the rate study will fully reveal whether that is the case while we continue to orchestrate the plan by which we correct the billing issues. And that is underway. We recognize the city's failure in that regard. Hindsight is 2020. And so as the city failed in that investment, as you are well aware, we took to task the entity that was responsible for that installation. We have received money back. And so our responsibility has been not only do we protect the city financially in terms of how we have borrowed against the general fund, in terms of what our bond covenants are within our water sewer bond covenants within our enterprise fund, and the investment that we have to make in a new water billing system, which is dependable, which we can ensure our customers that you get your bills on time, that they are accurate, and that you can go and see what your rate of consumption is. While we, prepare and create a system of accountability that they can believe in, we also realize that part and parcel of this process by which we get beyond this challenge is making sure that we eliminate the mountain that many of our customers have before them because it is uncollectible debt. It is debt that we will never be able to collect and they will never be able to pay. So what did we do? Now, this is one of the successes in this recent legislative session that we want to lift up. We were able to finally pass legislation that the governor allowed the time to lapse, where if he was going to veto it, he chose not to. And so now we have into law an ability that we can review some of this debt. We can review opportunities to support our residents beyond this mountain that they have in front of them that has accrued over time, months and months and months of not getting a bill. And Ms. Johnson, who's on a set budget, may be able to pay her water bill month by month. But when you hold that and give that to her after a year or 2 years, then it becomes a far more daunting task.
Right. And of course, we'll be speaking about the billing moving forward. But I also wanted to bring up those state revolving loan funds. What federal assistance does remain is mostly in the form of these loan funds. How much does Jackson draw from those funds and how can they be drawn on further?
Well, I can't give you an exact figure as I sit before you now, but I can tell you that we are a ongoing and constant applicant for the SRF loans. And we utilize the funds that are availed to us. Dr. Williams often looks at major projects regarding different infrastructure woes that we can use the SRF loans. But what we have to understand is while we are grateful and certainly want to get more of the SRF loans, we have to understand, and what we have been communicating is that Jackson, isn't just in need of an ability to fix one or two problems, one or two issues that a state revolving loan fund can apply. We need a continuous stream of revenue that deals with operations and maintenance, that deals with a declining infrastructure that was built at a time where our population was higher. And so, if we ever have any goal or aspirations of the population growing again, then we certainly have to be able to provide an infrastructure that people that they believe will support their lives, support the quality of life that they deserve, and support the growth of not only our residential communities, but our business community as well. And so that is why we recognize and say, listen, what we receive, not only in the SRF loans, what we receive, even in a 1% sales tax, is insufficient to meet the need. I have given the estimate that Jackson's infrastructure problems, and I want to be clear because some people have mischaracterized this as me talking about the water issues. I have said comprehensively, and I believe it is a conservative estimate at best, is that we have about a $2 billion infrastructure problem in the city of Jackson. How do I arrive at that number? Well, first and foremost, our discussions with the EPA have revealed that we have about $1 billion issue with our wastewater alone. That is before you get to drinking water. That is before you get to storm water. Not only have we had a 30-year flood at the Pearl River, we've had communities such as the Hemingway Circle community that because of the drainage issues, anytime that there is a flash flood, they deal with water reaching their doorway. We have issues in the Presidential Hills community that they suffer the same things on Franklin Delano Roosevelt, where water rushes up to people's doorstep. And so we have all of these issues, and that's before we get to roads and bridges. And so I think it is a conservative estimate at best. And the money that I have referred to that we utilize is intended to address all of those issues.
So I'm quoting, I want to go back to one last question about rates. I'm quoting from the GAO report here. The U.S. Conference of Mayors estimated combined annual water and wastewater bills of more than 4.5% of income as unaffordable based on the EPA policies. Now, in 4 out of 10 of the cities they reviewed, average water and wastewater bill was more than 8% of income for low-income households. How can the city estimate the average cost of water and sewer services as a percentage of household incomes here in Jackson?
Well, what we do is bring people in far smarter than myself, Nick, to evaluate and do a rate study based on the income of our residents, the average household income, looking at the history of our bills, looking at the history of the challenge of collection within those residents that stretch beyond the challenge of failed infrastructure in terms of our water metering system, but people who just aren't able to achieve that aim. We know that we have a high poverty rate in the city of Jackson. And so all of that has to be evaluated. And you can't continue to tax the poor more and more and more and more. At some point, you get what is a diminishing return. And instead of getting more money to address the issues, you get less money. When I owe the bank $1,000, then that's my problem. If I owe the bank $1 million, then that's not only my problem, that's the bank's problem. And so we have a lot of debt that is owed to us that is not only our residents' problem, but is the city of Jackson's problem. And so we have to be methodical and thoughtful in the process of not only how we address the challenge, but how we put forth a rate which is affordable, at the same time sufficient to meet our needs.
So let's see.
Hey, let me jump in there real quick while you're shifting, Nick. One of the things that really kind of struck me about Nick's part 3 that came out yesterday, and that really looked at this 50 years of what cities like Jackson have gone through, and particularly the cost of the wastewater and so much population shifting out, white flight, after integration, and then kind of seeing the arc of how that happened. And then that then there were clearly needed Clean Water Act and environmental rules that the cities had to start following. But then the federal government helped pay for it. and then they didn't when the Reagan era came. And it just kind of reminded me of so many unfunded mandates in a way, even if the mandate is an important thing. And so I guess my point here, Nick is smarter on the details of what I'm talking about, but listening to you talk about the cost, I guess it makes me wonder if we could ever kind of, it's not that math doesn't work. It feels like if what we're trying to do is pass the cost of fixing our infrastructure, kind of like you said, to the ratepayers, and particularly poor people in our capital city. And a lot of these costs are kind of metro, if I'm understanding the reporting right, it's like metro wide. So I'm not even sure, Mayor, what the question is I'm asking. But I guess I'm trying to put a fine point for people who might not have read that long story from yesterday on this idea that it really is a math problem as much as anything else. I mean, there are things that have been done right and wrong, but the costs are just building. And so without everybody working together, it just doesn't seem like it's possible to fix these problems.
No. I think under the historic metric that you're speaking of, where they try to pass that cost along, that it isn't feasible. What we are cautiously optimistic about is that this new emphasis on infrastructure, this new emphasis on understanding that America's aging, right? In terms of looking at other nations, what we have to understand is that our country is, relatively young compared to other nations. And so as this nation is aging, we are now dealing with the issues of how we address an aged infrastructure at a much more alarming rate than we have had to deal with at any particular point in time. And so our hope, our optimism is that that all of the federal family works together to understand that you can't just sanction or deal with regulation on cities without giving them a way out, right? It's almost like our discussion on how we deal with undesirable activity within communities or amongst youth, right? We can't just tell them what not to do. We got to give them an alternative of what we want to give them, alternatives, healthy alternatives for them to do, right? And so in the same way, cities, while we know we have a wastewater issue, right? And we want to change that. But if we don't have the resources to do it, then it's not a matter of political will. It's a matter of capability. And so until we understand that issue or that question of capability, then no one is really sincere about, the regulation that is being, imposed.
So I want to bring up, in my conversations with the GAO and looking at the report that they put out, they identified a number of strategies that legacy cities like Jackson have used to offset the infrastructure burden in the post-EPA grant era. Can you talk about the specific strategies that the city is engaging in now, and we can break that down to specifics?
Well, I think I need a little more cueing and
Certainly
specifics on what you're asking.
So two of the solutions I can tell you, Dr. Williams suggested to me are improper for Jackson. There's right-sizing infrastructure. That means cutting down on redundant infrastructure, that sort of thing, and growing the customer base. Those are difficult, in Dr. Williams' words, because of the geographic realities of Jackson. But another thing is the pursuit of public-private partnerships. And he told me that the financial limitations of the city made that unlikely. Why not pursue public-private partnerships to support Jackson's utilities?
Well, it is an ongoing question that we look at, and you have any number of entities or organizations that knock on our door looking to possibly partner with the city of Jackson. What you have to understand is that often in those discussions, it leaves the city unable to manage and control things such as rates going forward. You can leverage away some of your abilities in that way. And then you may be able to serve to get money to address some immediate infrastructure goals and challenges. But the real question is whether you have the ongoing revenue, if you have leveraged that away, leveraged the control and maybe leveraged away a percentage of the revenues, whether you will have what you need going forward. And so sometimes what we do is we may meet the challenge of this moment and just say, look, let's just kick the can down the road and let someone else deal with this challenge when they arrive at it. For us, many of these obstacles and challenges that have been kicked down the road, we are the wall that you can no longer kick it down the road, and we have to address many of these challenges today. And so I won't summarily dismiss the concept of whether there can be some form of partnership that is beneficial, but I do hold an ideology and a principle of self-determination where we want to be able to have more control over how these services support and benefit our city, because for many of those companies, it's business, right? And so when you're dealing with a city, yes, you do have the function of business that needs to operate and run efficiently, but you also have the human characteristic where you have to be concerned how this benefits people, what is the impact of people, and if you don't do that, then you can find yourself in a very dire situation.
Donna, do you want to take that next one, or I can?
Actually, I hadn't looked at the next question, but I will say one thing. I will say one thing here. When you talk about public-private partnerships in that way, it's a conversation that my partner Todd and I have been having for a long time, and I do think something I would urge people watching this to think about is that very often public-private partnerships don't work well because of what you're talking about, because of the profit motive. Mm-hmm. Something that I had done reporting on over 20 years ago in another state was private ambulance companies, as an example. And so what they would do is, they would cut services, instead of it's in order to keep the profit motive up. And so when you have, and I think it's what you're saying, but I kind of want to bring it home for people. And again, I'm not saying you don't look at it, but I hear you when you say that there's some very serious problems very often connected. And another one I'll throw on the pile here is transparency. A lot of times it's much harder to get what should be public information about what's happening with taxpayer dollars when it's a private company involved. So I mean, that's kind of another issue. Again, not taking a stance, but just kind of urging people to think about those things.
And if I may add, Donna,
Please.
I may add by extension some examples. There was a time where the city of Jackson collected its own garbage, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of services that over time our residents, remember, whether it was machines that sweep the streets and help with the litter issues, and ultimately the decision was made to contract that out. And what happens when we privatize many of these services is that the first agreement that the city takes on may be attractive, right? Mm-hmm. It may seem like a way in which you can facilitate the services at a lower cost, and may seem like a win for the city. Mm-hmm. But what ultimately takes place, if that is an attractive offer, is that you diminish your capacity so much, right? That when the next contract comes around, you aren't capable of moving it in-house and facilitating the goals and responsibilities. And so those companies have you right where they need you, right? They have you where they can change the cost, right? They can change the expense, and you pretty much have to shoulder that burden because you aren't capable of bringing those services in-house again. And that can be stated for so many areas across the city where we used to execute those responsibilities, but now we contract a majority of that out. And so you have to strike a good balance between what you outsource and what you do in-house, realizing that becoming imbalanced leaves you in a vulnerable state.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two strategies that I think the city is pursuing right now. And those two are a major reorganization of the Public Works Department, number one. And also they are, sorry about that, asset management. That's the next thing that the city is pursuing. I want to talk about the reorganization first. Dr. Williams said that the city is considering breaking up the Department of Public Works into 3 subdivisions. Please tell us more about that proposal.
Yes, in having conversations about efficiency, conversation about, what is the best structure for success, and identifying not only clear delineation of what those responsibilities are. I think it is also important that we understand that no matter the structure, that we have to have strong, qualified candidates to run those divisions. And that is always a challenge, right? Especially when you're looking at public dollars. The public dollars are often incapable of competing with the private sector. And so that is the challenge of how we strike people who are not only good at their job, which I believe we have many across the city, but who are also motivated in order to provide the best service to our residents. And so we are happy about that reorganization. We feel that when the city of Jackson's public Works Department was last organized, it may not be consistent with the challenges. It may not be consistent with the resources that we have to bear today. And so we need a structure which reflects where we are presently and what is the most efficient means of providing services to our residents.
So my understanding is that hypothesized breakup of the Public Works Department would separate it into 3 different divisions. You'd have the Public Works Department, which would handle water and sewer, regular maintenance, those sorts of things. You would have the Office of the City Engineer. That would handle long-term capital improvement projects. And then you would also have the Water and Sewer Business Administration. And that would basically be the billing and that side of things. Talk a little bit about, because I know some places choose to break it up based on type of utility. They will spin off their water utility. They will spin off their sewer utility. When I brought that up to certain experts, including Dr. Packman, who I spoke to, they kind of cringed at that idea. They thought that it was a better idea to break it up by section. Can you talk a little bit about why the structure looks that way in these proposals?
Well, let me say this. What we have now is hired an outside agency to assist us in the process of determining what is best for the city of Jackson. Hopefully, we research and look at all of the recommendations and identify where we best fit in that process. But what we realize is that, dealing with the challenges of water billing administration and dealing with the challenges of executing tasks of fixing and repairing the many things that need to be fixed and repaired, whether we're talking about in the water division or whether we're talking about, roads and bridges and drainage, have become very huge tasks. And for that to fall under one person's umbrella, it makes it difficult to execute the various goals that we have. Our water billing administration, through maybe failed ventures or whatever has led us to this point, means that it requires a specific focus on how we identify strategies moving forward, not only how we build confidence from our customers, but how we provide the routine and regular information that they need each and every month as they are paying their bills. And so, we've talked about the need to revamp our system. But another big goal, like I said before, another big goal is restoring the credibility of our water billing administration. And we feel that that goal is large and important enough that it may require specialized attention to do so.
So, Mayor, we have a reader question here that I wanted to put to you. And I know I had told you that this conversation is about water and infrastructure, which it is. But I thought that this question kind of fits in. It's like you can see it for yourself. Why not close, as this person called it, the loss leader zoo, needs over wants? And I actually think this fits into the conversation because of the kind of larger systemic issues we're talking about too, as far as the history of all this personally. But what would you say to that?
Well, what I would say is that, often we carry narratives that are anecdotal in nature and less fact-based. We have anecdotally, without any proof, without any facts, without any metrics, said, hey, that this zoo is not going to fail because it's not going to succeed because where it is located. And that's just not true, right? We have certainly advanced where the zoo was a couple of years ago. Not only have we been able to have USDA licensing extended now, not only have we been able to make significant repairs to the zoo that were outdated and not dealt with many years. Not only have we seen every day that we do have the zoo open, we've seen a robust crowd that patrons the zoo, and we've actually had to turn crowds away at times because the interest was great. We also see the convergence of other investment that is taking place in the area. If you have traveled Capitol Street recently, then you cannot miss the construction which is taking place on Capitol Street, which is long overdue. We have about 100 homes, more than 100 homes that are dilapidated in the area that we have decided to focus in that area that we are now about to commence demolition on. And so these are part and parcel of an investment, realizing that not only do we want the zoo to be successful as an entity that creates a sense of place, that creates an atmosphere that people want to visit the city, but also recognizes that we are one city with one aim and one destiny. And so when we take and strip resources from one part of town, deliver it to all those resources in one area of town, then we can create an imbalanced structure, which is not beneficial to the shared goals that we have for our city. And so we see the zoo as an opportunity to grow economic development, grow the city of Jackson, realizing that when you create a sense of place, when you create an atmosphere that people want to go to, then it builds. When I say that this is anecdotal in our analysis on the zoo, we're having that analysis understanding that one, we have not marketed the zoo like we did in past years. Understanding that we have not built the attraction in the way that people want to come and see over several years. And then we're saying that the zoo will fail. If McDonald's stopped having commercials about the next burger, if McDonald's stopped and they started reducing the menu and start taking the items that you may like, then even McDonald's would fail, right? And so what we want to do is make sure that we approach this from a data-driven standpoint, that we approach this from a position of information. And so we've had recent success, and we will continue to look at what management company or what management alternative is best for the zoo. And occasionally, we thought we had good conversations going, but they drug on a little longer than that company wanted them to drag on. And so sometimes contracts do not work out, right? That's why you have negotiations. Sometimes those contracts do not work out. And so we will be looking for what is best. But what you don't want to do is agree to something that is not in the benefit of the city at large.
And the only thing I'll say here, it's more just kind of an editorial coda to that. But I think, and especially if people will read Nick's 3-part series, and this isn't just an ad for the stories. Literally, the whole point of what we're talking about and how we got here has a whole lot to do with flight from the city and from certain parts of the town, and then leaving neglect behind. And so I would kind of I would challenge people to think about that. If the argument is that we're supposed to keep pulling resources out, and in order to, out of parts of town that people are giving up on. And it's really good news that the roads are being terrible there, and a lot of the housing around there. But I should kick this back to Nick because I know he's waiting over there.
Can I add another point to that history that people may not be aware of? And this isn't intended to be disparaging, but it is intended to be informative. Another challenge that our zoo suffered from is the mismanagement of funds, right? And so we had a very large challenge where bond funds were being utilized to pay to pay wages. And so we had the mismanagement of funds that made it very troubling and very concerning. And we also discovered that there was an imbalanced amount of money going towards legal fees to discover how you move the zoo, right? And so in the process of applying the resources and supplementing the zoo, as we've been going through this, prolonged transition period, we've discovered that a lot of that, had it been applied to the zoo, then we probably would have gotten a better return on our investment.
So I wanted to, oh, sorry.
No, go. No, it's your turn.
The last strategy I want to talk about is asset management. Asset management is obviously the process of using software and other techniques to identify which pieces of technology and which utilities need to be upgraded, repaired, and improved at certain times. The city is now beginning to use a piece of software called CityWorks to start asset management. But why has it taken the city so long to begin using asset management in its water utilities?
Well, Nick, this may come as a surprise, but the city has been slow to update many systems over time. And that may be the regular push and pull of politics, where politics is the study of who gets what, when, where, and how. And when the who that needs resources is so abundant, then sometimes it may be difficult, or it may seem difficult to justify why you put money in terms of efficient programs like that, as opposed to paving one more road. And so we think that we have a better return for investment by making these decisions so that they can be informed. What we do in the city of Jackson, what we have historically done in the city of Jackson, is utilize infrastructure into absolute ruin, until it is driven into the ground and there's no more use for it. And some of these software modules have the ability to predict and give us a better analysis of what needs to be done now, so that we can prioritize and no longer be chasing after a problem. My mother used to say that if you don't have a plan for tomorrow, then you'll always be struggling now. And so we have to figure out, how do we plan better once we get back some of these immediate glaring challenges that are in our face? How do we create a structure and a system that allows us to better project and predict what needs to be managed more immediately?
So I did want to address a more recent topic while we have you here. There has been some disagreement between you and the media outlets about a March 27, 2020 EPA final order. Now, when asked why City Council hadn't been informed about this March 27th document, which addressed deficiencies at some of the city's water plants, you said the reason we hadn't sent it out is because the draft hasn't been finalized by any party. When it is a completed document, both the EPA and the city of Jackson agreed to, it will be issued. So I reached out to the EPA, and they clarified for me that it did constitute a final order, not a draft. Your response to the EPA does seem to acknowledge this. You wrote that the city would comply with the order and rectify the deficiencies. Where is the confusion coming from here?
Let me clarify that. And a portion of that is where I did misspeak. And so I will clarify that. In terms of informing the council, we inform the council of things all the time. And we drop into executive sessions and we let them know. We have discussed with the EPA. They are concerned about this. They are worried about our drinking water. They are worried about, how we upgrade certain systems and how we provide more human assistance to, Class A operators, and how we automate the feed system. Let me be clear that document, because that causes a great deal of concern for people, that document has not opined that there has been any test that has demonstrated the city of Jackson's water is unsafe. What they have indicated is that the processes that we use, they fear could lead to that, could do so if we don't update them. And that's why we've been in the process of working with the EPA. The draft conversation where I misspoke was not one where I should have said that there was a draft on the executive order. There was a draft that we were working on a consent agreement. And so as we've been working hand in glove, in fact, we talked to the EPA today, and they wanted to express how they, feel good and comfortable about the relationship with the city of Jackson and want to continue to work with them. And so as we were coming out with what that consent decree was, what the city will move forward and invest in, and what our plan moving forward was, we wanted to make sure that we centered along with the EPA on what needed to be done before we communicated that. There have been letters going out to the residents telling them, that this could be the case and that could be the case. And those are all based on the process that we are failing to execute in the way that they and the Department of Health advise. If the city of Jackson had bad water, or there had been proven water that was dangerous to our residents, then you would never have a boil water notice lifted. It requires samples sent to the State Department of Health in order for us to lift boil water notices. So the level of conspiracy would have to be between the city of Jackson, between the State Department of Health, and between the EPA if we were providing bad water in that way. But that part of that you recognize, Nick, and I'm thankful for that question because it allows me to clarify what the draft was.
Right. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the content of the letter, because as you point out, it's a question that a lot of people are concerned about with regards to the safety of the water. The order itself states that continuous monitoring equipment at OB Curtis has not been repaired or calibrated for approximately 3 years since the term as instrument technician position was vacated. So what I want to know is, has the instrument technician position at OB Curtis been filled? Has that equipment been properly calibrated? And when did that happen?
Well, when and the technical components of that, I would refer to our public works director because he would be better equipped to give you dates and times of all those things.
Love to talk to him anytime about it.
Yeah, I'm sure we can make him available to you. But from my discussion with the EPA today, as recently as today, they feel comfortable with the way we're moving forward with this, and so these things are taking place. What you may read in those documents may seem like things that can happen, instantly or immediately. But as we have had in our conversations and explained the process and explained the challenges of our systems, what they have grown to come to understand is that more time is needed to do these things. And so we are walking and communicating on a day, on a weekly, monthly basis, speaking to one another about the challenges. They call me on my cell phone and get the Region 4 director on the phone. We've talked to the director, the national director of the EPA, the day after he was confirmed. One of the first calls. I can't swear that it was the first call, but it had to be, right up there at the top, because the day after he was confirmed, we were in conversation, and they have completely put all of their support or rallied behind Jackson to support us not only through this challenge, but walk us through the steps of how we work through the challenges of how the process by which we treat water.
So, kind of tying these two conversations together, when it comes to some of the, and again, I'd love to talk more to Dr. Williams about the specific details of the order. Look forward to doing that soon. When we talk about some of the filter problems, some of the UV reactor problems, could asset management, the kind that we spoke about earlier, have helped anticipate and address some of these equipment failures before they happened?
Well, once again, you're getting more technical than a mayor can really go, Nick. What I can share with you is this: the failure to upgrade a lot of the systems we have has not been a measure of valuing one thing over the other, as it has been a lack of resources. I tell people that I think the best way to characterize what we experienced in February was not so much that the city was ill prepared as we were ill equipped. Right, we were ill equipped to deal with the challenges, and so we knew it was coming. We knew that when we went to we went to the state government and said, look, extend our 1% sales tax so that we have more opportunity to leverage the funds to do the work that we have to do right now. Right, and if you extend it, it makes it more attractive to the financial institutions that are willing to allow the city to bond against this stream of revenue. We knew that when we apply for SRF loans, and so the challenges that you see today are the challenges you see today, but you didn't see what we had to invest in paying for a train to be repaired, or paying for the structure that we've already identified and allocated the money for a shelter to go over the trains so that it is weatherized. But that is not the panacea. And so what we experienced in February was something that we hadn't experienced before. Our distribution challenges in the past have been distribution challenges where either those trains were not covered, right? Or the pipes themselves ruptured at such a significant level that we could not get the water into the tanks. Thereby, when the water was being utilized and consumed by our residents, we couldn't fill it back up. What we experienced this February were raw water screens that had frozen over, valves that had frozen over, instruments, both mechanical and electrical, that had failed. And so we've known that this is coming, right? And we've been crying out for them. But it demonstrated what we knew to be true in this past February, that these are things that are past due and being recognized and addressed.
Mayor, even talking about that, and then I kind of want to say here that, you know, before we went on the air here, I think Nick and I were kind of almost separately praising you and the administration for Michelle, who is your who is doing a wonderful job getting who did a wonderful job getting information out to the people during this crisis. I was very impressed with the city at that point. So transparency, as you know, is a huge issue for us, both as media and just as residents. And so I'm kind of wondering within the parameters of this kind of water crisis, you know, is there, I guess I would say, what is the plan to almost better communicate these intricacies that you're talking about here, that are the challenges with water infrastructure that we all need to be thinking about? Because I think a lot of people felt like they were in some ways blindsided, even if they shouldn't have been, by the water crisis. But talk a little bit about transparency in your plans.
Well, I think, and you know this, I always prefer and you know, enjoy taking discussions directly to the people. That has proven to be somewhat challenging in the midst of our COVID reality, to you know, have the community discussions that we have. You know, I praise the work of my father's administration in literally going to community centers, taking pipes to people so that they could explain just how aged and how sufficiently our pipes are deteriorating. And so we look forward to doing that. But we also want them to know and need their assistance in how we maintain pressure on the agencies, both state and federal, that are needed and necessary resources to be able to address these issues. We don't expect that residents are going to become technocrats that are going to know what a raw water screen is, or even a train at the water treatment facility. But what they do need to understand is that ultimately cities, Jackson included, isn't failing to address any of these things because of a lack of political will, but a lack of resources. And so we have to talk about, all of these conversations are interconnected. We've gone from, you know, a discussion over our drinking water and what took place in February, from a discussion over water bills and what is the proper rate to put on our customers. It is the money that we get from water bills that helps take care of the things we're talking about. And so when you have a failed water billing system that doesn't enable you to collect on the revenue from what people consume at a sufficient rate, then it will ultimately lead to fewer monies being available to deal with regular operations and maintenance expenses, right? So that's one area that we have to correct. When you've had white flight, when you've had divestment, when you've had infrastructure that was built for larger populations that is now needed to be maintained by a smaller population, then ultimately you still have the conversation that even if you're able to collect at a better rate than you're doing presently, you still will have, more than likely, you still will have, you know, infrastructure, or you will have not enough money to meet the needs that you have across your city. So all of these discussions are interconnected, and it requires that we continue to discuss every component of what we've talked about today. It is important that we know the history. You know, I was hit with the question, I think it was an appropriate question, where we not only talked about the failure of infrastructure and the age of infrastructure, but we talked about the question of equity within infrastructure. And someone said, you know, how is it that you know, South Jackson doesn't have water, but yet North Jackson does? Well, the reality is that our residents should be aware that there isn't a North Jackson switch or a South Jackson switch, right? That what happens when we turn on the water is that it flows through the pipes in the way that they were created. So yes, there are equity issues, but the take happened a long time ago, right? The take happened when the city was gridded out, when planning and development over time decided, what would be, kind of the more valuable land that people would pay the higher expense to live versus what would be areas that were less attractive because the resources aren't as close to. And so water travels to Northeast Jackson sooner because the plant is closer to Northeast Jackson, right? Our plant operates on hydraulics. And so it takes the pressure within the system to not only travel all the way to South Jackson, but to push up the hills that people live on. South Jackson, by and large, is at a higher elevation than a lot of the city. And so these are the things that took place a long time ago. And so it is important that now, as we have this conversation of how we build a more robust, sustainable, dependable infrastructure, that we also do one and achieve the aim of equity within that, to make certain that we don't have the experience in South Jackson that we have come all too accustomed to.
I'm going to sneak in one more question because it's from a reader and it's really relevant to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's water, even though it's about flooding. And so what I'm curious to know from you is, in all of this, we've been busy with so many things between water crisis and pandemic. We could have a flood, and but without going deep into it, people could Google my name and flooding and see some of the things that we've written about in the past. But where does the lake / flood control strategy stand? And then the other part of the question, which is what someone sent to me, is basically, what is happening? You talked about equity. What is happening to maximize the chance that if the One Lake plan happens, that Jackson will share fairly in the economic benefits of that, which has always been a concern of mine and some folks around me. So if you could address that, then we'll get you out of here right after that, I promise.
Well, first and foremost, I've enjoyed our conversation. So I wasn't even paying attention to the time. But I thank you for that question. And Donna, you and I have talked about this before.
Yes.
And that one thing that I've always lifted up is the equity or the economic questions of one such proposal. The position that I'm in is, just as we've been in this conversation and invariably, whether Nick asked a question, I think it was more Nick, Donna, that I'll blame it on than you, that I may not have had the expertise because I'm not an engineer, because, that isn't the area of my study. I pass that along to the people that I trust and believe in based on their area of expertise and study. And so when it comes to the One Lake project, right now, it is being reviewed. It is being reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers to see if they believe that it is a sound flood management system and whether it will create harm to other areas or other residents, whether in the city of Jackson or all the way down through Louisiana, where it could potentially affect people. And if it creates any harm, then it will not be approved. I am eagerly anticipating seeing what the engineers have to say about that, because Chowke A didn't go to engineering school, right? Chowke A, can only listen to the competing positions of one engineer or the other. And I can assure you that I won't support anything that I think first and foremost will cause harm to anyone downstream or anyone around our city. And I want that to be clear. In addition to that, I've held the position that yes, while there may be some concern over flooding, and yes, that concern is all the more present today in 2021, having experienced what we went through a little over a year ago. But I do not believe that it is that issue that gets people as excited about a project like this as it is the potential for economic development around it, right? And so my position and my quick phrase on that is that if it don't pay, we won't play, right? What I mean by that is that I want the city of Jackson, if there are some economic benefits to be derived from the project, right? If that is where ultimately people will center, then I want to make sure that the city of Jackson gets its equitable share of what that looks like. And I want equity more than I want equality, because equity takes into account not only the percentage of land that can be utilized on the city side versus Rankin County side. It also takes into account what will be the financial structure of maintaining such a lake. What will be the tax dollars, or who will take the lion's share of providing the tax dollars that will support that. And so that is important to me. And I think equity has to be lifted up in this question, along with environmental sound, structure and safety of people as well.
Well, and I really appreciate you saying that. You know that one of our concerns there are many concerns that we have about this option, but one of them has been equity and who's going to benefit from the project. And so I actually really appreciated the reader who sent us that question, because I do think that we should keep it front of mind. Thank you so much for doing this, Mayor. I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I know we haven't hit everything that people would want us to talk about, but I do think I appreciate you coming here and just sitting down in this kind of focused conversation. Hopefully we do it again in the future over a different issue. And then obviously Nick has done the homework, and I think is doing a fabulous job on this series. And I really kind of encourage people to go to MississippiFreePress.org and it's all on the front page right now, so you can find the whole series, and that work is still ongoing. And our big thing is to try to help educate people on the issues that are involved in this and how we got here. And that's kind of the gist of what the Mississippi Free Press is trying to be in general. And on that note, I'd get in trouble with my co-founder, Kimberly Griffin, if I didn't ask people, if you can, to please go to mfp.ms/donate and give a few dollars. We're in our spring Truth to Power campaign right now. And that's direct, huh? And all, we're nonprofit, and your donations all go to more reporting of the kind that Nick has been doing.
Always tip your journalists.
Always tip your journalists, right? Throw a few dollars in there. We appreciate any amount that you can give. And this has just been wonderful. And we'll get more viewers afterward. We get a lot of people. We ask people to share the program, and because I think there was a lot of great information here today. So thank you so much, Mayor, for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.